Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar from the UK Customs Academy about transit. My name is William Barnes-Graham, the Senior Content Editor at the Institute of Export and International Trade, one of the organisations behind the Academy, and I will be your host for this afternoon. And we're looking forward to lots of interaction from you, our audience, over the next hour. Now, the end of the transition period is truly looming upon us, and how we trade with the European Union is going to change, whether we reach a deal or not. Throughout all of this, proper planning and ensuring compliance with changing regulations and obligations is a must for effective and timely trade from the start of next year. There are many solutions available to companies looking to streamline what could be quite complicated export requirements post-transitions, and this includes customs authorizations such as transit, which we are looking at today. I am delighted to welcome today's speaker, Nick Anthony from the Home Office. Hi Nick, how are you?
Hello Will, yes, thank you very much. Nice to be here. Good afternoon, everybody.
Nick has worked in customs and excise, HMRC and Border Force for 37 years and is currently seconded to Home Office Learning with international trade responsibilities, leading on transit and NCTS training. Before I hand over to Nick, though, we'll be running a few polls throughout today's webinar, starting with this one on the next slide, which is, do you currently use the transit system, which I shall launch now? The options there, unsurprisingly, are yes or no. And just a couple of housekeeping notes while you are answering that poll. Firstly, you can contact me with any comments or questions using the question panel on the control window to the right-hand side of your screen during this webinar. And secondly, afterwards, you will be receiving access to today's slide pack and a recording of the webinar, so do please make sure to listen in to what Nick has to say. Now, I'll just give you all a few more seconds to answer this poll. So answer now or forever hold your peace. I'm going to close the poll now. And the result is 80% are saying no, 20% yes. So hopefully for those of you who aren't using it already, hopefully you'll find out about whether it's right for your company. And if you are already using it, hopefully today will help you with your future use of it. Anyway, on that note, I am delighted to hand over to you, Nick, on the next slide. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Will. Well, that was interesting, the voting there, and certainly that I would hope that the slides and the presentation that I'm going to share with you over the next 45 minutes will give you an insight into whether or not transit may be the correct regime for you. So next slide, please, Sam. So what I'm going to talk about initially, we've got the subjects there on the screen, and first of all, it is what is NCTS? So next slide, please, Sam. NCTS is the new computerized transit system. Now, as you can see, it was introduced in 2005, and it was mandatory for all countries who wanted to be in the EU or join the EU. And we have had it since 2003. It's a European-wide system, and it's used not only by countries in the EU, but also by common transit countries, of which we are likely to be one post-Brexit, and also special territories, but I will expand on those in a moment. Prior to the NCTS system, all we had were the documents. So some of you will be familiar with those transit documents, T1s for goods requiring duty to be paid, T2 duty paid goods, and so on. Okay, next slide, please. So as I've said, it's mandatory for anybody in the EU or anybody who wants to join the EU. And the fact that we are moving out of the EU upon Brexit won't change the fact that we will still be using transit. In fact, the powers that be expect that our transit traffic could go up 20 times. So it's quite a significant amount. The common transit countries, just to refresh your memory, are the 4 countries that were in the European Free Trade Association, so Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein and Switzerland, plus the countries that are trying to become allied fully to the EU, and that is Serbia, Turkey and North Macedonia. And the special territories are, I won't bother to go through them all because you can easily Google them, but and many of them you probably will never come across. But to be a special territory, you have to be linked fully to the EU, either economically, geographically, or historically. A lot of the ones, for example, linked to France are almost Caribbean states like Réunion, Guadeloupe, and so forth. The one that has particular significance to the UK is the Channel Islands. So that at the moment is a special territory, but post-Brexit, we are expecting that the Channel Islands will move up to become a common transit country with us. Okay, next slide, please. So obviously NCTS was produced because it is very, very useful for trade facilitation, and I will come on to that in a moment. It's a vehicle which is able to enhance the flow of traffic through the transit system. And the paper, obviously, if you have a lot of paper, then you have all sorts of problems with, as many of you will know, the amount of paper required by government departments is vast. And obviously, if it goes missing from a trade point of view, it's a question of where are those goods? Where's that consignment? Is it going to be released quickly by the authorities, or have I got to duplicate that those documentation again? And obviously, if you've only got paper, it doesn't enhance communication. At least having something on an electronic platform, such as NCTS is, enables you to have numeric references and to be able to find out exactly where that is, who's dealing with it, and where it is going to move to next. And clearly for the trade, this will cut down the expense, because hopefully goods will be able to move freer, and it is a fairly straightforward system. There is no doubt built towards trade facilitation, and it is a fairly straightforward system. Okay, next slide, please. So it obviously does things twofold, in that it assists the trade with the efficient processing of freight going through and out of the UK, and it assists the authorities with being able to see exactly what's coming in or going out on a screen without having to go through loads and loads of paper. And clearly, when you are being able to action details on a computer screen, then you're able to see where they're going to next, because the NCTS system, and obviously it's difficult to explain the semantics within a computer system, but what happens when it is lodged at the office of departure, and we'll come on to that in a moment. So when it's pre-lodged or submitted and then accepted by the customs authorities, it then moves through a number of states before it's released. So it's a 4 or 5 step process, which, assuming everything is all correct within the declaration, shouldn't take too long, and then it will move along to the next stage. Okay, next slide, please. So it's standard throughout the EU. Everybody within the EU and the other countries I've mentioned, the other groups, common transit and special territories, must have the NCTS system. They don't all have to have exactly the same system, but they all have to have a minimum version of the system. And the UK has the minimum version of the system with a couple of further additions. So it basically enables the transit movement to be released from the office of departure to the office of destination, and we'll come on and see those in a moment in another slide. And it allows, with facilitating the trade, the way in which it does that, it allows the trade to actually suspend payment of revenue prior to deciding what's going to happen at the final destination. Okay, next slide, please. So this is how it works, really. These are some of the construction about it. When you have the NCTS system, if you apply to HMRC and you wish to be an NCTS trader, when you log on in whichever platform, WebExcel, whatever you log on to, you see the MCC, and essentially, as it says, this is the minimum common core. Brussels controls the main system, the CCN, the common core network, and we run a system through that. So going through the European network. As one of the bullet points says there, 600,000 operations per month. And if you consider that that could possibly go up 20 times, and I'll give you the reasons for that in a moment, we could have 12 million, so a vast amount. Now, unfortunately, for those of you that are using Chief and later on likely to be using CDS, it doesn't work in the same way. So you cannot send messages backwards and forwards to HMRC or to Border Force. There isn't that type of communication, and NCTS is a standalone system. And with reference to that, to explain the note there at the bottom, basically, if you are at the office of departure, so say, for example, you are at the office of departure, you're working in Southampton, and you are sending something out onto the continent using the transit system, you can put your declaration on the NCTS system at any time you wish, and then it will wait there until the Border Force office opens, and once the vessel has arrived or the plane has landed, then they will action that declaration. But, and this is the but, once you have put a declaration on the system, you cannot change it. If you've made an error and you contact Border Force and say, I'm sorry, but we've submitted this on the system, but there are these errors, then they would have to reject that to you and you would start again. Okay, next slide, please. So this is just a little bit about how the movement reference number, and just to give you a little bit of background, when a trader submits a declaration onto the system, he completes an LRN, a local reference number. So his trader's reference number is the reference number when it is pre-lodged, or as we refer to it, in the submitted state. Once the vessel has arrived, once it is ready to go, then we have the MRN. Okay, so the MRN is the movement reference number, and that is 18 characters built from the first 2 characters are the year, the country, and GB is the United Kingdom, believe it or not. GB stands for United Kingdom for transit procedures. Then the next few digits are the specific unique transit office number for that particular office, and the rest are random. So when it's released from the office of departure, the document, which is an exact representation of what's on the NCTS system, is printed off, and that has a barcode which can be scanned and that is known as the transit accompanying document, and that moves forward to the office of destination. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so just to give you an example, now I've mentioned the office of departure a couple of times, and you might think, well, how is this useful to us? If, for example, you had some goods that were coming from the Far East, you've got some clothing from the Far East coming into, we will say, into Felixstowe and being delivered further down the line to Birmingham. Normally, on a normal importation, you would pay duty at the first point in the EU. So you would raise the import entry, pay the money at Felixstowe, and then it would go on its way. Clothes are obviously seasonal, and if it was winter woolies and it was March and it was like it was during lockdown, about 23 degrees, the trader thinks, right, I'm not going to be able to sell these, but I've already paid out the duty and VAT. So then he'd have to go through a lengthy repayment claim with HMRC. What transit does is it enables the trader to submit the declaration and decide what they're going to do when they reach the final destination. So in that scenario, once the clothes had left the office of departure at Felixstowe and then moved forward, Birmingham would be the office of destination, and it wouldn't be until they left the office of destination at Birmingham that the trader would need to decide what they were going to do. So if they thought they weren't going to sell them, then they could just put them into warehousing, leave them in warehousing for 6 months, and they haven't got to pay any money outright. They could re-export them, they haven't got to pay any money outright. Or then if they decide that they wish to bring them in to home use, then they put in an entry. Okay, so next slide, please. And so basically, I just touched on this about accepting or rejecting the declaration. So the office of departure, first place where the transit documentation is lodged. And once, if we assume that customs accept the declaration, if everything is all right, then they will give it no control. If they believe that there's problems on it, and sometimes it could be that the trader doesn't give the full description, because the full description is key with this, because commodity codes are only mandatory for excise and cap goods. So once they decide that they're happy with the declaration, then the guarantee, and we'll come to guarantees in a moment, the guarantee is checked, released, and the goods can then move forward to the office of destination. Because the goods are moving with duty and VAT and any other customs requirements suspended, then a guarantee has to be lodged with a bank, and we will be coming on to that in a few minutes. Okay, next slide, please. Office of Transit. Now, Office of Transit is one of the reasons why we are likely to see a big increase post-Brexit. Essentially, the Office of Transit scenario comes in when you cross the border from the EU to a common transit country or vice versa. Because we have always been in the EU, this scenario isn't going to happen. So goods can move quite freely within EU countries. However, once we come out of the EU and we become a common transit country, then the Office of Transit scenario is likely to happen at most ports and airports within the UK. And this will obviously lead to an increase in declarations that go onto the system. So the Office of Transit will receive the declaration from the Office of Departure, and then if they're quite content with what's happened, it moves forward to the Office of Destination. Obviously, they can stop it if they wish, but that it is something that is fairly unlikely to happen unless there are major errors. Okay, next slide, please. So the Office of Destination, once it's been released from the Office of Departure, they receive a message, and very, very similar to the Office of Departure, that the customs authorities can either decide if they're going to control the goods, which essentially means asking a question if they're not happy with the declaration they've got, in the same way that would happen if there was a problem with an import entry or export entry lodged onto Chief. And then once they are content with that, then it moves through and is released. Okay, next slide, please. So from the point of view of transit and how it works in the UK, HMRC hold the policy for transit, as they do many other areas of international trade. It is dealt with at the border by Border Force, so there are two agencies that are involved in the management and administration of transit. You can think of the CCTO, the Central Community Transit Office, as being the UK's hub and for transit, because it not only is it for government staff for dealing with inquiries from them, liaises with EU countries, but also provides a help desk and advice to the trade. And if a trader wishes to become an NCTS trader, the CCTO is where they would go to. Okay, thank you. Next slide.
Great, thank you, Nick, so far. We're going to go to our next poll now, which is asking, do you feel you have enough knowledge of the NCTS system? Just going to launch that now. The options again are yes, no, or not sure. We've had a few very good questions come in already. One question asked from Tristan, which kind of puts this into a context. So Tristan's asked, after Brexit, will a movement of UK free circulation goods moving from the UK to, say, Switzerland be moving under T2 like it is at the moment?
If it is moving from the UK to Switzerland, it would actually be T2, because both of those countries would be common transit countries. So unless you build in a third party, it should still be a T2.
Thank you. And a clarification from Nikki is asked, can you please clarify where the Office of Transit is? Is it UK or EU?
Office of Transit is an office an office which is activated by the transit movement crossing the border of an EU country into a common transit country, or vice versa. So when it crosses the border, so to give you an example of what happens at the moment, about the only one that we have at the moment in the UK is Immingham. So how it works is, say for example, the goods start in Stockholm. Stockholm would be the office of departure. They move to Oslo, so they've gone outside the EU. They're coming into a common transit country, crossing the border, but Oslo isn't the final destination. So that becomes an office of transit. They then move across the border back to the EU, as we are now, into Immingham, but it's not the final destination. So because it's crossing the border again, Immingham is an office of transit, and they're ending up in Birmingham, which is the office of destination. So it happens where you cross the border of a common transit country into the EU, or vice versa, and that is why the office of transit scenario is going to happen more once we come post-Brexit, because instead of going EU to EU, they're going to, if they leave the UK, they're going to go common transit to EU.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Nick, for both the answers there. I hope that's been helpful. Thank you for the questions, as always, everyone. Just to show the responses there, so 43% saying no, 24% yes, 33% not sure. So all of those not saying yes, hopefully the rest of the webinar will be of use. Anyway, back to you, Nick.
Okay, thank you. All right, now moving on to guarantees. So as I mentioned on the earlier slides, if somebody wishes to use the NCTS system, then duties, all the duties, VAT, etc., are suspended for that journey until they reach the office of destination. So the commercial person who is involved or is leading on that is known as the principal, and it's the principal who is going to be tasked with arranging the guarantee with the guarantees team in HMRC. So if you next slide please, and I'll explain how this happens. So as I said, it's arranged between HMRC and the principal, and obviously it makes sure that you've got a secure payment of any potential customs charges for the duration of that journey under transit. The principal would normally have the money lodged with a bank or a similar financial institution, and the guarantee is valid or has to be valid for all member states and anywhere that the transit movement moves through. Okay, next slide, please. So hopefully everything would go according to plan, but if not, if the goods go missing, if they don't arrive at the office of destination within the time period set by the customs authorities, and there isn't a good reason, then the guarantor or the principal initially, and then the guarantor could be asked to pay the customs debt. Okay, next slide, please. So there are various different types of guarantees. Now, how it works, if you've got a trader and they're going to be sending out goods regularly under the transit system from a port, then they apply to HMRC for a comprehensive guarantee. Obviously submitting the details of their transit movements, the type of goods they're moving, the frequency. And HMRC will then assess all of that and decide on their comprehensive guarantee. And how it works is the comprehensive guarantee will be set on their busiest trading week of the year. And there'll be a little bit about that in a moment. There is the possibility, if they show that they are adhering to various criteria, are moving goods correctly and not abusing the rules, that they could get a reduction in the guarantee. And indeed, if they are able to take over responsibility and show that they have sole financial ownership of that company, their own transport links, and they're adhering to all the rules, they could even have a waiver, which would mean that they don't have to have any money lodged with a bank at all. And then there are individual guarantees. I'll come on to those in a moment. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so how the maximum busiest trading week of the year is calculated is basically it is the potential revenue of at least a 7-day period within that 12 months. So it's quite advantageous to the trader because it may well be that their busiest trading week of the year, will say, it involves £10,000 revenue. They could have another 10 trading weeks in that year where there are £5,000 revenue. But HMRC don't require the whole potential revenue for that year to be lodged as a guarantee. So it's the busiest trading week of the year. Obviously, if they were then to take on extra business, that would affect the guarantee and they would need to notify HMRC to have that increased or produce an individual guarantee. An individual guarantee is valid for 6 months and 1 movement. And that can either be in a similar way, electronic, or it could be cash, or if you're moving goods via TIR, then voucher system. Okay, next slide, please. So this just sums it up. And for those of you who aren't Carol Vorderman or Rachel Riley, it's nicely set out there so that if you didn't know already, that 500,000 is 50% of a million. You are able to find that out now. Although the 30% of a million is too much for them to work out, so they put it there at 300,000. So essentially, if you are trading under the NCTS system, then you can apply, I think it's after 6 months, you can apply to HMRC for a reduction in your guarantee and your reference amount. So the reference amount stays the same, but the actual money you have lodged with the bank is a lot lower. And that's obviously going to be beneficial. So it's all about being trusted as a trader. Next slide, please. Okay, a comprehensive guarantee is normally lasts for 2 years, and obviously if the trader is still moving similar goods, then that can often be extended. So if it's coming to the end of its 2 years, it will just be extended. Okay, next slide. And that really is just a little bit about the level of guarantee within the guarantee management system. Very briefly, the guarantee management system is something that is built into NCTS. So say, for example, if the trader put in the incorrect details or the guarantee had already exhausted, the NCTS system via the GMS would scan that and it would move the declaration into the guarantee under amendment tab, which in itself is a misnomer because, as I've said, you can't amend anything on the system. So what it would mean that the trader would need to contact Border Force and request a cancellation and start again. Because it's a little bit like, for those of you who dealt with imports on Chief, if you haven't got enough money in your deferment account, then the goods won't clear. So it's similar to that scenario. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nick. So we're going to do another poll now. This time we'll be asking, do you think that transit and NCTS will give you better options post-Brexit? Options being yes, no, I'm not sure. We've had loads of questions come in, but I'll do a couple on guarantees for now. One from Sharon has asked, if we have AEO status, will we need a guarantee for transit movements? And another one we got in from Becky was asking if the guarantee for NCTS is the guarantee for NCTS totally separate to the guarantee you might be required to have for other customs authorizations? So AEO and general.
If you already have AEO and you want to be an NCTS trader, then you come in at a level of 30%. So, and on the next slides, it does mention that. So if you've got AEO, you come in at 30%. So it's highly beneficial. This is, if you like, it's different to some of the other guarantees, but if you have got other authorizations within HMRC, then I would imagine that they would look favorably on being able to reduce the guarantee. Clearly, you have to show that you're commensurate with the transit rules and that you're able to move goods in the correct way. So if you're able to show compliance and you are ensuring that you're regulating what's expected of you by HMRC when they set it up, then you are likely to be able to have a reduction in guarantee. But it's important to remember, and this will be on one of the next slides, that if you are an AEO trader, you come in at 30%, not 100%.
Thank you, Nick. Just going to close this poll now and share the results. So 54% not sure, but of those of you who are more sure, more of you saying yes, that's 35%, 11% no. So back to you, Nick.
Okay, thank you. So the last subject now is about authorized consignors and consignees. Normally, with the NCTS transit system, once the declaration is lodged at the Office of Departure, you then wait for the authorities to deal with that, and that is normally fairly quickly. They will know that it's there, and they will deal with that. But often it may not be as quick as you would want, and you don't have your own specific ownership of it. So this the next subject, authorized consignors and consignees. If you are dealing with goods at the Office of Departure, you can apply to HMRC to be classed as an authorized consignor. This means that you don't have to wait for the customs authorities to process your declaration. Now, this obviously applies to large companies, conglomerates, but also it is open to anybody who is an NCTS trader. So you apply to HMRC, and if they're satisfied that you are not going to be a risk, and again that you're showing good compliance, they could offer you the opportunity to be an authorized consignor. So next slide, please. Basically, what happens is the authorized consignor puts the declaration on the system. It will be automatically accepted on the system, and there a timer then is activated. In the same way that there is a timer for import entries, automatic clearance, then this is similar. So you have a timer which is normally around about 30 minutes, although it can be less, and that's assessed by your compliance deemed by HMRC. So if the customs authorities don't look at that declaration within 30 minutes, it moves itself along right through and releases to the Office of Destination. So without any customs intervention. You don't also have to put that to your local Office of Departure. You can choose to put it on the system to an alternative supervising office. So depending on your geographical location, you can either move it to HMRC South or HMRC North or Border Force at Heathrow. The reason being that you've got those choices is HMRC are only open normal office hours, but obviously Border Force at Heathrow are 24 hours. So you could submit it, and unless Border Force or HMRC decide to put it under control, in other words, ask you for some further paperwork or potentially put it out for a physical examination, then that will move of its own free will. The timer expires and it moves to the Office of Destination. And one of the questions earlier was about AEO status. AEO, as many of you will know, is probably one of the highest approvals you can have through HMRC, and I expect many of you that do have it will be aware of it. It can be quite a lengthy process. And so once HMRC have established that you are an AEO trader, there's obviously a great deal of security and trust in your business activities. So if you are an AEO, then it is highly likely, and if you apply to be an authorized consignor or a consignee, that it's likely to be more favorable that you're able to be given that trade facilitation. Now, the authorized consignee does exactly the same, but at the Office of Destination. So they will receive the goods at the Office of Destination. There is a timer period again, and if that isn't actioned, then the goods, if it's not put under control, the goods can then move, receive unloading remarks, and the authorized consignee can have their own premises set up and approved by HMRC outside of the immediate dock area. So they could be quite some distance away, but obviously do bear in mind that they're still be deemed to be under customs control whilst they're traveling to that destination. Often you may get authorized consignors and consignees work together because they're able to make what is a fairly straightforward operation even quicker, and they're able to do that between themselves without involving the authorities, unless, of course, there is likely to be some sort of problem within that declaration. Okay, next slide, please. So many advantages to the trade on this. They can operate 24 hours a day. And if you are an authorized consignor, you should only put in your declaration to the HMRC or Border Force office. And remember, it's HMRC South or North or Border Force at Heathrow during their opening times. But then the goods can move directly from one place to the other. And obviously, if you've got a timeout period, then you haven't got to wait for somebody to deal with that. As long as everything is in order, you can move it straight through. Next slide, please.
Great, thank you, Nick. So we're going to do one last poll quickly before we go into the Q&A. So the last poll is our weekly tracker asking how prepared do you feel for post-transition trade with the EU? The options range from very prepared, quite prepared, not very prepared, not at all prepared, not sure. We've had loads of questions in. I've certainly got my job on to manage them, so I'll try to group things together as much as possible, and if you don't get to your specific question, please do feel free to contact us afterwards. The first question I will ask, we've had a couple of people ask about Northern Ireland. So one from Jane we got was, if I just try and find it again, what documentation will be required from next year to move goods from, say, between Belgium to Northern Ireland to Republic of Ireland, transiting the UK? She says union and non-union goods.
Okay, so from Belgium to the UK to Ireland, yes?
Yeah.
At the moment, and as I think on one of the previous webinars talking about our Northern Ireland policy, Northern Ireland is going to be aligned to the EU, but there could well be differences if you bring in a third party. So say, for example, if goods move from Belgium to the UK to Northern Ireland. Now, if this is post-Brexit, then the office in Belgium would be the office of departure. They would come into the UK, and the UK port would be the office of transit, and then going out to Northern Ireland, that would be the office of destination. Now, it wouldn't matter whether or not they were ending up in the Republic of Ireland rather than Northern Ireland, because if they're transiting through the UK, the office of transit scenario would still occur. And as I understand it, unless they are just moving directly from the EU to Northern Ireland, that's the only way at the moment that they would be absolved from this type of system.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Just to show the results to that poll, so 56% said quite prepared, 4% very prepared. So well over 50% of you are saying you're feeling prepared, which is a positive thing. 29% not very, 3% not at all. Hopefully you'll be able to come to our future webinars, which will help you further in terms of your preparations. Right, so if we go to the next slide, there's just some more information about how you can ask questions on these webinars. There's a control panel to the right-hand side of your screen. Now, one of the things which is coming through, so obviously people coming to this webinar from different levels. So I'm just going to ask a couple more high-level questions, or sorry, low-level questions first to warm up. So one from Glenn who's asked, are you envisaging individual traders applying for NCTS rather than this remaining within the realm of forwarders and hauliers? If yes, then would a groupage move with multiple TADs on a vehicle to arrive work, or is this aimed more at traders moving full loads?
It is aimed at traders, but they can move groupage, but it has to be if the goods are dropped off at different places on the way, then that particular transit movement would have to stop there. So say for example, you can't move goods en route to a warehouse and then start up the movement again. You have to have a movement already set up. What you can do when you set up the office of destination, the original office of destination that you set out can change. You can change that. You can divert it somewhere else by notifying customs. But essentially, the movement, if you are unloading goods on the way, then that part of the transit movement would have to cease.
Great, thank you. And again, just a real recap question just for people who are newer to this. So Nikki and Ken have both asked similar questions. Nikki asked, please could you give a scenario when you would use transit instead of an export declaration? And after this one, we'll go into some more technical questions.
Well, I think regardless of whether it's imports or exports, I think with transit, because you're able to suspend the duty and VAT, then it's giving you greater legitimacy, greater flexibility over your finances, and particularly if you've been trading for a while and you're able to have a reduced guarantee or even a guarantee waiver, which is zero, because when you are exporting, importing, and exporting, then there is money that the duty is paid up front. So it gives flexibility.
Thank you, Nick. Next question I will ask will be one from, sorry, just getting a few in at the same time. One from Darren, who's asked, how will the new pop-up authorized consignor sites planned for Brexit, such as North Weald, work? Would the trader need to raise T1 and truck then travel there before departing the UK to get rubber stamped for export?
To be perfectly honest, I don't exactly know what's going to happen with those yet. I do know that HMRC are bringing in a lot of people to assist with the whole Office of Transit scenario, with scanning the documentation to prevent delays. But exactly how it's all going to happen, I'm afraid I don't know. I think that still all of those areas are still being finalized.
One for a future webinar potentially. A question from another Nicholas, who's asked, post-Brexit, would it be more efficient to use the TIR system than the common transit? And just for everyone, could you explain what the TIR system is?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll probably if I had enough time, I would have included TIR, but I think because the presentation sort of lasted around about 40 minutes, I wouldn't have been able to do that and have questions. For those of you who don't know, TIR is Transport International Routier, and it is a type of transit system where you can cross borders without or with minimum intervention by the customs authorities. The main difference between that and Union Transit, I mean, we used to call it community transit, but now Union Transit, is that the TIR movement must start or end outside the EU. And it is available for around about 60 different countries. So apart from the EU countries, there are also some of the former Baltic states, the countries that end in stan, even China is allied to TIR, and just recently one of the United Arab Emirates has joined. So it very much depends on where you're moving goods to. How it works is that the TIR system is operated with a carnet, which is a document with a number of vouchers attached. So when I was talking about guarantees earlier, guarantees are mainly electronic. The type of guarantees that we've been talking about were lodged electronically with banks. Under the TIR system, you have the vouchers that are torn off and stamped when the goods are presented at each border point. And those vouchers are worth money. Each one is worth around about 6,000 euros. It's probably increased a little bit now. And the potential or the maximum guarantee allowed on any carnet is 60,000. So if you've got goods which have a guarantee of over 60,000 euros, you couldn't move them on the carnet system. And the other thing to remember is you cannot move excise goods under carnet, so you wouldn't be able to move cigarettes, tobacco, or spirits using the TIR carnet system. So really, it's entirely up to you where the goods are coming from. Most of the carnet traffic that we see in the UK is from Turkey, and it can be goods coming in to carry out a type of processing and claiming relief and moving under TIR transit, or it can be exhibition goods. It really depends on where you're moving goods to and from and what your choices are. But certainly if I'd have had enough time, I would have gone into the TIR system.
Of course, Melissa, the nature of an hour-long webinar, we can't cover everything. So we've had a few questions on offices of departure. So I'm just going to play out a couple of scenarios people put through, which hopefully will clarify things for people. So one scenario was for GB to Italy, would that be departure office in Dover and then the transit office declared in Calais, and every other country the truck passes through until arriving at the destination office?
No, it would be the first point where it crosses the border. So it would be the first point where it crosses the border. So if it was going from Dover to Calais and ending up in Italy, if we were post-Brexit, we would be common transit. So Dover would be the office of departure. It would go to Calais, be crossing the border into the EU. So Calais would be the office of transit. And then because Italy is within the EU, the end point, then that would be the office of destination. I mean, if it then went out of the EU after going to Calais, then that would be an office of transit before it then came back in the EU. So it's the place where it crosses the border.
Fantastic. So in case of another scenario from Peter, who's asked if a T1 is raised at, say, Tilbury to go to Spain via Dover to Calais, is the office of transit Calais?
Right. So yeah, basically, if it would be, because it would then be going out to Spain. You would probably have two offices of transit, because it would be going out via Dover across the border to Calais.
Okay, thank you, Nick. A question in from Pavel, I think that's the name. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. So a UK export forwarded by UK transit from an agreed location inland in the UK, will the transit automatically transmit through Chief when the transit document has been discharged at the office of destination?
No, there's no link to chief. If often if it's when it's linked to the office of destination, then there would be a separate, it may well be the cargo processing system would then be used, but it would have to be chief doesn't link. So it would anything that you do on another system would be done separately. Once the transit movement finishes, then whatever happens on NCTS doesn't suddenly press a button onto chief. NCTS is a separate system to anything else. So what should happen is the NCTS operation should be complete, and then you would move on to another regime. So it would then be, if you brought the goods into home use at the office of destination, then it would then be cleared with an entry on chief. And indeed, there could be a cargo processing system which would be used if it was going inland for an RRC to clear that. But no, NCTS doesn't link with anything.
And will that still be the case with the future GVMS, the Goods Vehicle Movements System, and the Smart Freight System?
Well, it depends. I don't think with GBMS that it's going to link to chief. I might be wrong, but I don't think it's necessarily going to link to chief. I know that the NCTS system is under review, but I think that's going to take a couple of years. So GBMS, it's going to be up to each port and airport to decide whether they're using the GBMS system or whether or not they, if they don't have enough traffic, whether they're just actioning it in the same way as they are with Office of Departure. But I don't think that it's immediately linked to chief.
Thank you. I'll do a couple more questions. We had one in from Steve earlier who asked, is VTAD always a paper document, or can it be carried in electronic form, i.e. on a tablet or computer?
Yeah, of course it can. Yeah, the TAD can be, I mean, often it's on a smartphone, it'll be scanned. And that they may well also have paper documents. Say, for example, where that would happen, if at the Office of Departure, we'll say that the trader puts down, describes the goods as household goods, and the Office of Departure sends him a control message, puts the goods under control, and wants further detail about what the goods are, what household goods are. The trader then comes back and says, oh, these are cleaning materials, brushes, dustpans, or whatever, puts in the packing list, and then the goods are released to the office of destination. Because the trade wouldn't want the similar hold up at the office of destination, then they would probably send the documents with the emails as hard copies, or certainly available on tablet form, to show that this has already been resolved and doesn't need to be queried again. But yeah, it can be used on smartphone, tablet, whatever, because the barcode, once the TAD is released from the Office of Departure, you have got a barcode which is unique to that movement reference number, that 18-character movement reference number.
Fantastic. And I'll squeeze in one last question because we've not talked about excise goods in the Q&A. Stephen asks, we trade excise goods into the EU currently. The aim is to import on behalf of our EU customers after Brexit. If we are creating new EADs in Netherlands, France, Belgium for onward transport, do we need NCTS?
No, you don't. It depends if you wish to use NCTS. You can use NCTS for excise goods. You just cannot use TIR for excise goods. And you will have large spirits companies who are authorised consignors that will move goods under NCTS. So it's just a question of what really works for you.
Well, I think on that note, we're coming up to the hour. So thank you once again to Nick for the presentations and answers. They're very comprehensive in such a short space of time. So I hope everyone has found that useful. And if we move on to the final slide, thank you. You will find details about how you can get in contact with the Academy if you have any further questions or queries. And please do let us know if you have any further suggestions for topics for future webinars as well. Just to say a little bit about the Customs Academy before we go. The Customs Academy was set up by the Institute of Export and International Trade alongside KGH Customs Services and the Centre for Customs Services at the request of HMRC. Our role is to help prepare businesses and individuals to gain the knowledge and skills around international customs that will be essential for trade in the years to come. We offer a full range of training courses from level 2 to 7. So whatever your prior level of customs knowledge, we have a course that will be right for you. And these courses are, many of them are fundable by ongoing government grant funding. So really an opportunity not to be missed there, opportunity to effectively get free customs training. Please do get in touch if you'd like more information about that. But that's all from us today. Goodbye, everyone. I hope you found that useful, and we hope to see you at a future webinar. Thank you. Bye.